Hello and welcome. You're watching Medically Speaking, and I'm Meenakshi Upreti. This is a time when everyone's talking about coronavirus, but we are going to move away from that and talk about something which is equally relevant in today's day and age, but perhaps the least talked about. I'm talking about mental health. Now, it's a significant day, an important day, but I'm sure many of you may not have heard of it. It's a Suicide Prevention Day. Why is this day important? What should we do, or how can we help those around us who are suffering, have depression, anxiety, and perhaps cannot come out? How do we ensure that they do not reach that path of suicide? To discuss that and more, and the theme of the day, the significance of the day, I have a team of experts with me. Thank you all for joining us. I have Dr. Sandeep Vora. He's a senior consultant, mental health and psychiatry from the Apollo Indraprasth Hospitals. We have Dr. Jyoti Kapoor. She's a senior psychologist from Paras Hospitals. Dr. Harpreet Kaur, senior psychologist from Women's, also with us. And I also have Dr. Akansha Batra. She's a senior psychologist from Medanta. Thank you all for joining us. My first question to you, Dr. Vora. As far as mental health is concerned, it's certainly a topic which isn't much talked about. Suicides, of course, the rate of suicides very high, as much as 70,000 a year. Now, in the era of COVID, when everyone's fearful of the third wave, second wave has waned, the cases are going down. Help us understand, especially for the viewers who are watching us, why we need to talk about this topic today, sir.
See, mental health has long been neglected, Meenakshi, all over the world, especially so in India. But post-pandemic, what has happened is that suddenly it has come at the forefront and everybody has to take notice of it, because from all the angles, you feel people are stressed because of COVID-19, and the second wave has worsened the mental health of people. As per the records from the government, our government, in the year 2019, we were losing every 4 minutes, one person with suicide. That is very high. And we lost 140,000 people in the year 2019. These are government figures. That shows these are all pre-pandemic figures. And you can very well understand that if pre-pandemic figures are this, then what will happen or what is happening at present? Suicide is generally underreported. The commonest reason being that people have this social taboo of not disclosing if they have lost somebody who's near, who's a relative of them. So they don't want people to know. So the reporting is definitely less. With pandemic coming, we have to understand that mental health is the most important branch now amongst all the branches. We are all focusing on COVID-19. Yes, that is important. But behind, once we are able to control the COVID-19, there is silent epidemic of mental health problems, which we must address. And suicide being one of the extreme problems in the society, we have to understand that unless until we give emphasis on mental health, awareness on mental health, and the fact that suicide is something which is preventable, these figures unfortunately will rise.
And I think that's a very pertinent point you raised, Dr. Vora. And I'll take this conversation forward with Dr. Batra. Now, what Dr. Vora says is known to all, Dr. Batra. Of course, official figures which had come in last say that 7% of those who had tested COVID positives also reported mental health issue. Now, we're just talking about those who had reported, who had come out on their own and spoken about these issues, of course, which are a taboo in our society. COVID has really created a lot of anxiety, depression amongst people, loss of near and dear ones, loss of jobs, financial insecurity as well. Isn't it all of that really adding to the anxiety, depression, and making people perhaps susceptible to taking such an extreme step? Would you agree, Dr. Batra?
I would certainly agree. COVID has not only caused us just job losses. There has been reporting of a lot of domestic violence. There has been a lot of reporting of parenting issues. Of course, job loss is there, business loss is there. And a lot of people have started to notice health anxieties in them. They started to worry a lot about their own health. So a lot of times we would get patients who would just be talking about, minor symptoms that they would notice in them and would make big in their head, and that would just worry them a lot. And also with that, there's a lot of grief of losing people around them. There's a lot of grief of losing loved ones. So all these accumulation of all these things are leading to people to take such drastic steps, and lack of support as well, I would say. So people not reading through the signs of suicide, people not reading through the signs of depression. So this also is reasons for taking such big steps.
Right. And I think, Dr. Batra, you've again made another important point about us as a society failing to read the signs of depression. Dr. Jyoti Kapoor, do come in the conversation here. When we are speaking of recognizing the early signs, there are also, of course, those skeptics who rebuff mental health issues as something not very important. I have myself heard from very educated people who say, oh, it's a disease of the rich. Mental health depression only happens to the rich because they are privileged and they are bored, perhaps have nothing better to do. How would you like to really debunk this myth today, considering it's such an important and significant day?
Yes, Meenakshi, you are rightly pointed out that there are so many myths and fallacies surrounding mental health issues that even amongst us doctors, amongst psychiatrists, there will be people who would still be questioning themselves because all their colleagues are questioning them. So first and foremost myth that surrounds mental health is that people tend to feel that if it comes to your mind, if it comes to feeling sad, it should be in your control because most of us should be able to control it. So if somebody says, I'm feeling sad, the other person will say, come on, man, get out of it. You're not going to feel sad. You should make an attempt. We have patients coming in and their caregivers, parents, spouses, coming and telling that, look, this person, he doesn't even try. He's always thinking negative. He doesn't even make try to, think positive. Now, most of the time I have to retort by telling them, who do you think really likes to feel sad? Do you think one actually wants to feel sad and suicidal? So we have to understand that brain and our nervous system is part of our body. And this physical organ does contribute a lot to how we feel because that is a function of it. And if we are not able to feel good or we are not able to look at things around us positively, it could be a neurochemical imbalance, which is what it is. And when it is a problem, it is an illness, it is not in our control, then like we'd go to a doctor for a stomach problem or a heart problem, we also need to go to a doctor for a brain problem. So, no
Yes,
rocket science
as
there.
simple as that, right? It's as simple as that. When we speak about, of course, if we have even a small ache, if we even, burn a part of our body, little, our hand or whatever, we speak about it. Why are we so ashamed of talking about mental health issues? Dr. Vora, since we're talking about the reluctance of the family members, the relatives, and friends around in recognizing the early signs, do you also or have you also seen this reluctance amidst the patients? Are they initially apprehensive, or perhaps initially do they refuse to accept that they could be suffering from depression?
Yeah, some of them could be, reluctant. Because see, in a acutely depressed state of mind, you are not able to take any decision, logical decision. And if you are too negative, you can think like this because you will have ideas of hopelessness, worthlessness, and you will feel that, life is not worth living. And you will also feel that nobody can help you. So yes, we see such patients also. But the matter of the fact is the treatability aspect.
Right.
Through your channel, I would like to highlight the fact that suicidality is treatable. So like the way we treat diabetes, hypertension, similarly, depression is a treatable disorder. The way you check your blood pressure and sugar and you get readings, similarly, by mental status examination, we can get to know whether somebody is depressed or not. And based on that, we have medication and counseling. So timely intervention can help us in preventing so many people from committing such a act, which is a major loss for humanity, losing someone. So the treatability aspect has to be understood. The social taboo definitely prevents people from discussing it. And if somebody is feeling low, he or she would be too reluctant to share it with anybody because they would feel that they are being judged. So all these things have to be understood. And the most important aspect is that if you have anybody in your family who is depressed, the best way is to start a dialogue, encourage that person to speak. And if there is even a casual mention of suicidal ideas, that should be seriously taken by the family members or their loved ones, so that they can immediately connect to mental health professionals and seek help.
Right. So you say even if someone mentions casually that they're suicidal, it should not be rebuffed, which it is. You also spoke about two other things. One, of course, counseling. The second, medication. Dr. Batra, are there myths around medication? Because now we have many celebrities also. In fact, within India as well, it's a certainly positive change of trend that people have started coming out and speaking about mental health issues. I would still say the taboo exists, as all of you were saying. It's not been normalized completely, but counseling is something which many may still be open to. Do you face resistance when it comes to prescribing medication and following through?
Yes. So a lot of times when we would be through counseling telling the patients to, you should start some medication or we should refer you to some psychiatrist. So they have a lot of questions like, these medications are going to be taken for lifelong. Are they going to be addictive? Am I going to be
Yes,
sleeping
actually, I've
throughout the
heard
day?
it from many people. Is it addictive? Will I feel sleepy through the day? Tell us more about that.
So yeah, so there would be questions like I would be taking it for lifelong. People are going to call me names. They are going to refer me as a mad person, and am I going to be sleeping throughout the day? How is it going to help me? There would be resistance to medication, but we also have been seeing resistance towards counseling as well. So people do not really want to be seen around a psychiatric department or going to a psychologist. So a taboo of confidentiality or not being seen around a psychologist or a psychiatrist is also there. So we need to do a lot of counseling for the caregivers and the patient themselves regarding the medication, as well as how the treatment is going to be
Okay, I
followed
think
up.
Dr. Vora wants to come in here, and then I'll go to
Yeah,
Dr.
yeah,
Yes,
yeah. I will tell you, Meenakshi, that once you say that medicines are addicting, the best example which we give, which is immediately understandable, is I asked them, have you known, is anybody in your family taking medicines for high blood pressure? Is anybody taking medicines for diabetes? So our medicines are similarly like that. So why should you think like that these medicines are going to be lifelong? If in some cases you feel there is severity of the illness and you have to give it for long term, it is life saving. One. Second part, what has happened, it's a blessing in disguise. Post pandemic, government of India has released telemedicine guidelines. So the social taboo aspect, anonymity, all can be actually taken care of if you are going through digital mental health. So all over the country you have all digital health services. So digital mental health is the way forward, and people who are reluctant or have some issues as far as disclosing it to near and dear ones, they can simply log on, go to the nearest online available mental health professional and seek help. But remember, life is very precious.
Right, of course, but a lot of it would depend if you're able to detect the early signs. Dr. Kapoor, what are the early signs which one needs to watch out for? All right, we have anxiety, we have hopelessness, but these are not very easy to catch. Many times, of course, the one who is suffering generally suffers in silence because of the taboo and the social stigma around, of course, mental health issues. And second, is, of course, the obliviousness. I will not just say the resistance, but sometimes it's just obliviousness of those around the patient to be able to help him or her to begin with.
Right, Meenakshi. And see, we already know that 90% of the people who commit or complete suicide have mental health issues. So this is a significant thing. Plus, secondly, the stats we have is that most of the suicide currently are occurring in the age group of 15 to 39 years. And that's a very young age. So when you have young people coming with, neuropsychiatric or psychiatric issues, it's not just depression or anxiety. There can be a number of problems that can cause one to have suicidal ideation. So one is talk, the most apparent. If somebody is talking about suicide, if somebody is saying that he or she feels life is not worth living and what's the point of going on and living, then it has to be taken seriously. One. Second is behavioral changes. Often you will see that people who used to be usually talkative and gregarious have stopped, interacting with people, are withdrawing, are not, doing things that they used to enjoy doing. Second important behavior, and which is very, very significant, is that one starts actually talking about death more often, or starts looking for, online or offline literature on suicide, death, means of committing suicide. You would often find nowadays younger people, searching the web a lot on suicidal memes and how it is done. So that's a very significant thing that can be figured out and noticed, and we tell parents to keep a watch in that regard also. The third important sign of suicide is, other than the biological changes of psychiatric illnesses, as if not sleeping, not eating, etc., is substance abuse. Many of the people start consuming liquor or start smoking or doing drugs more often in the period when they are acutely stressed, or start feeling that they are of no use or life is not worth living. So all these signs are very significant telltale signs. Once we have seen the signs, there are screening instruments, suicide screening tools available, which are very simple questionnaires, which we can use to find a cutoff that, okay, this person is having active suicidal ideation, or this person is not
and the
having
type of
active suicidal
intervention which
ideation.
is required. But once, Harpreet Kaur, once you have been able to detect that a person indeed has suicidal tendencies, what would be the first immediate step which you would take, and what would be your advice to their family and friends?
So first and the foremost thing, when we know that person has suicidal tendencies, we refer them to the psychiatrist for the medication. That is must when person is having suicide tendencies. Plus, we also advise get admitted to the hospital, because it's very important to take care of that kind of a client, because under the effect of disease they can do anything and can do take any step. So it's very important to be admitted or under observation for 24 hours. So if going home, the counsel, we psychoeducate parents, and that they have to be with the client 24/7. They can't leave the patient alone, not even a bathroom, not while sleeping. So simple things like there should not be any sharp objects near the client. There should no wires around the client, and medicine should not be in hands of a client. It should be under the observation. Can only parents or a caregiver can give the medicine. So these are few things that we have to keep in mind when client has suicidal tendencies.
All right. So from counselor, of course, it goes to the psychiatrist and the specialist, and then, of course, it's 24/7 care, which is provided, of course, to such patients. But Dr. Vora, we are speaking about the suicidal ideation treatment. So the treatment itself is extremely important, and there's a lot of lack of knowledge around it. Help us understand, really, if someone does have suicidal tendencies, how do you treat that patient? What really is the diagnosis we've discussed, but what's the treatment?
Okay, so let's say that let me divide into three parts. One is suicidal ideation, second is suicidal attempt, and third is suicidal gesture. Three parts. The degree of severity varies. So if somebody has suicidal ideation, it could be a temporary setback in the life and you fleetingly have it. For that, it's important that you talk to somebody and see how far and how serious that is. Suicidal gestures are usually ways in which somebody is trying to ask for help. For example, wrist flashing or something like that, in which the patient has actually tried to do something, but it is not that serious, which could have caused that. But the third and most important for us is suicidal attempt.
Yeah.
Suicidal attempt is actually when somebody has tried to hang himself or herself, or has tried to take a drug overdose. So depending on the degree of the severity of the symptoms, the treatment is based on that. So for us, the suicidal attempt, or if somebody has left a suicidal note, that is something which is very, very serious for us. So all such cases usually are best handled while admitted in a psychiatric setup. There, once we admit the patient, we start the treatment, which will include pharmacotherapy as well as psychotherapy. And the therapy is not only for the patient, but also for the people who are near and dear ones, or the family members, or depending on the reason of the problem, if we feel that there are issues in the life of the patient, we try to address those and try to see if these can be handled during counseling. For gestures, as well as ideation. It depends on the degree of severity, which is definitely a forte of the person, the psychiatrist who's seeing, for that doctor to decide whether somebody requires medication, counseling combination. That can be handled on OPD basis. But the best part is that these all are treatable disorders, symptoms, and the treatment has to be seriously undertaken by the patient and the family. And if the doctor says the medicine has to be taken for long, please follow your doctor and his or her advice, and do not leave the treatment in between. That is something which we commonly find, that people tend to become non-compliant once they recover. So that is something which has to be addressed once somebody comes out of
Coping
that.
post-recovery also extremely significant, isn't it, sir? Dr. Batra, help us understand, if someone has recovered, of course, in mental health issues, I will not use the word fully or 100% recovered. If they are on the path to recovery, as Dr. Vora said, what should they do to ensure they don't relapse? And what should be, of course, the way forward then?
Right. So regular counseling, of course, then psychoeducating the caregivers, the parents, the family, having a very good social support system, keeping yourself occupied with things that interest you or your work, and be more hopeful about future, talking it out, and taking your life seriously, taking the value of your life seriously, and talking it out with your counselor, and adhering and complying to the treatment like Dr. Vora said.
Right, adhering and complying to the treatment, of course, very significant, over and above all the support which needs to pour in. And I wouldn't want to generalize, of course, this conversation. We've spoken about how everyone has individual issues, and each psychiatrist, each psychologist, each counselor, of course, assesses it according to his or her best ability. But Dr. Kapoor, if you look at the statistics, because that's where we had started and we're now reaching literally the fag end of the debate, so coming a full circle, if you look at the statistics, suicidal tendency, in fact, cases of suicide, just India specific, are much more higher when it comes to the younger generation, 15 to 29. This is when, of course, children are, they're kids, they're vulnerable, they're susceptible, of course, very emotional. How can parents really handle these children? What would be your suggestion to those, of course, who have younger children and they seem, of course, not to be behaving in the same way which they did?
And therefore, we are talking here, and I'm glad that we are talking about these things, because education and awareness is the first step. So we are talking about it today. I hope people are watching it out there. We need to accept the fact that suicide is a reality. It doesn't happen to our neighbor. It doesn't happen to people in the other town. It happens to everybody. Second thing is that because nowadays the suicide is not just because of a certain thought or an ideation. According to the suicide theories, there are two things that are important with suicidal ideation. One is that you have a feeling of worthlessness, hopelessness, a sense of burdensomeness, or a sort of emotional distress which is acute. And the second is the opportunity, the availability of accessories to suicide, be it poisonous material, be it firearms, be it videos talking about it. And similarly, talking about these issues in a very sensational tone. All these things actually provoke a person who is already, suffering to end up committing suicide. So therefore, for parents, for teachers, for educators, for all those people who are dealing with the young population, they need to be aware, and then they need to impart the awareness. And like Dr. Vora said, it is a treatable condition. We have to think of it in terms of a treatability of a disease, rather than thinking about it that, oh my God, I'm having such thoughts, I'm such a bad person. Or if a parent says, how can you think like that? You haven't thought about us at all. What will happen to us? What will people say if you end up, committing suicide? So we have to talk about it in a neutral manner. We have to talk about it in a manner which is non-judgmental, non-blaming sort of a manner. So the person who is going through these kind of thoughts can talk about it. And third important thing is, like I said, that it's not just you have to be depressed or anxious to want to commit suicide. There are people who are chronically diseased. There are people who have obsessive compulsive disorder and may have intrusive obsessive ideas. They say, I keep getting the thoughts that I should commit suicide. It's not like I want to. They are vulnerable too. And then there are patients with psychosis of schizophrenia who might be hallucinating or having these ideas that, I want to go and, jump off the roof, or there is something beyond this life that is awaiting for me. So education, awareness, identifying early signs, and then reaching out for help. So these are the things. And final thing I want to convey to the, people out there, just talking to a psychologist or psychiatrist is not going to put a label on your head. So at least go and talk. It doesn't mean that if you talk to a psychiatrist, they're going to put pills in your
Absolutely. It
mouth.
has to be a holistic support system and a holistic approach. Dr. Bhan, my last question to you as a counselor, how do you counsel when, of course, someone younger comes to you, susceptible, as Dr. Kapoor said, perhaps influenced by sensational tone sometimes, which is taken unfortunately in the media as well. Then you have, of course, the entertainment industry. Dr. Vora had spoken about slashing of wrists. We see that in our movies very commonly. Lovelorn boys jumping off roofs to convince their girlfriends. Those cases are pretty often. How significant is this to not talk about mental health issues frivolously?
So there can be, as Dr. Vora said, there are different reasons why person commit or can have these kind of ideation. So sometimes person have because of the hereditary. Some people have because of some bad experience in their life. When it comes to younger people, they face this. So sometimes people learn from the observation what other people are doing. So depending on the case, depending on the age of the person, depending on the case, we try to help the person to, basically the main idea is to challenge your negative thoughts, because when person has depression, they are having lots of negative thoughts about themselves, about the world around. So how to challenge those negative thoughts and change into the reality and think logically? Because whenever anyone has any mental health condition, there are definitely difficulty with the thinking, how you are thinking, how you are
You
perceiving.
said channelizing, of course, your energies from negative to positive, but overall holistic approach and involving family members as well. Dr. Vora, last word to you. I know you want to elaborate and take this conversation forward. This time, of course, the theme of the Mental Health Awareness Day, the Suicide Prevention Day, is also creating hope through action. What action should be taken to create this hope? Last word to you. What would be your suggestion to those perhaps who are watching the show, sir?
The first thing is that remember that degree of the depression determines whether somebody is open for counseling or it has to be through treatment with medication. So let a clinician decide if there is something moderate to severe range. One. Second, impulsive suicides are well known. So many times you see this is a category either young and adolescent without any telltale signs. Suddenly they could be impulsively going and they could be committing suicide. And people who are under alcohol and drug abuse, if they are abusing this, they could be going into category of impulsive suicide. The most important aspect is I really appreciate NewsX for highlighting this suicide aspect of mental health problems on a suicide prevention day. But the role of media is something which is very, very important. And unfortunately, many times, media's reporting in as far as suicide goes can become detrimental to the mental health of people who are watching.
And a criticism taken. We had seen that in, of course, Sushant Singh's case. It was nothing but for many. Unfortunately, it was overhyped and sensationalized, which yes, I agree with you. It wasn't.
WHO, Meenakshi, so WHO has a guideline. Indian Psychiatric Society has guideline. My request would be, like your channel, you are handling it is so sensitively and responsibly. All channels should handle suicide in a very dignified and responsible manner. And the message should go that it is preventable. If somebody has done it, that person did not take the help, you should take the help.
Well, absolutely, sir. I think you've summed it up very pertinently. unfortunately, not to sound defensive, but on NewsX, we had chosen not to sensationalize the Sushant Singh case, and we've not reported each and every development which had come in, like many others. Were not on it 24/7, but certainly that is a point, and rightly so, for media also to introspect. It's been a very holistic conversation, and I really hope it's helped the viewers. If it's helped even one person, we would have considered our job done. If you are feeling any sort of sadness, depression, anxiety, the symptoms, of course, which have been identified and mentioned by the experts here, please take help. We're all here for you, family members. I hope friends and family understand it's not a taboo subject anymore. Rather important day. Let's all create hope through action, as a theme of the day says. Thank you so much for watching, and thank you all our experts for sharing your views with us. Thank you so much.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.